Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are going to take a comprehensive look at Pauper's Ladder. Now, Pauper's Ladder is really only available from BedSit Games if you are outside of the UK. If you are inside the UK and you can use Amazon.uk, there is distribution through Amazon. This video is going to be similar to my somewhat recent videos on Quest for the Lost Pixel and Iron Helm, in which we took a detailed look at everything and kind of made this fully kind of comprehensive video examining everything about the games. Because as of right now, I think Pauper's Ladder is in this kind of perfect state of abundance. There's a lot of stuff available for Pauper's Ladder. The game feels big, it feels epic, but it still feels contained. It feels like there are a lot of options, a lot of modular pieces that you can kind of mix and match once you get all of the expansions. And in my opinion, it kind of feels like a complete game. For me, Iron Helm feels like a complete game. There's a whole game. I don't need anything else inside that little box. The same for me with Quest for the Lost Pixel. And now I do feel the same way about Pauper's Ladder. There are two little things that I want to see, but they are both kind of cosmetic, and we'll talk about those at the end of the video. So to start off, we're just going to take a look at the base game and give kind of a quick overview of the kind of game this is and how it is played. So Pauper's Ladder, you are playing as paupers, going on quests, trying to make your lives better in this kind of state of constant misery that you live in as a pauper. And you are trying to solve a number of quests to earn virtues. And there are 5 different virtues to learn during this game. So a pauper, you will have people like the Great Ognov or Bruni Lanklot. She might be a grave digger from Lilacsville, or the Great Ognov here might be a charlatan from Lilacsville. And on your character card, you will have a place to place your bird. We'll talk about the birds in a minute. You will have a starting piece of gear for your pauper. And then you'll have all the information you need about the virtues that you are trying to gain, the quests that you are trying to solve here. So we have the virtue of generosity. This is a virtue all about donating money. So you have to discard basically $30, 30 gems from your character card. If you do that, you gain the virtuosity, or the virtue of generosity. We also have our recipe book here, and you have to learn 5 different recipes to learn the virtue of knowledge. And we'll go over recipes in just a minute. Here we have the trophy room. So the trophy room has 2 virtues associated with it. We have the virtue of bravery, and you have to discard 30 strength of enemies from your trophy room. So this is all about combat. Or discard 1 dragon. If you discard a dragon, you can earn the virtue of magnificence. If you discard 30 strength worth of trophies, you can earn the virtue of bravery. And then finally, here we have the virtue of fellowship, and that is to solve 3 different quests. And we'll go over quests in a minute. So in the basic game is competitive. 1 to 4, or up to 4 players will be competing to see who the first pauper is to gain 3 of those 5 different virtues. So at its core, Pauper's Ladder is an overland crawl, very similar to something like Runebound or Talisman. You will be moving your pauper along with your pauper's bird, because each pauper in this game has a pet bird. And once you start adding in all the expansions, you have a lot of different birds to select from. At the beginning of the game, your basic bird is just going to be kind of another player. So you will have 2 turns on your turn. Your pauper can go out in one direction and your bird can go out in another direction. And each one of those can have an encounter with something in the region that they are in. So think of this kind of like having 2 different characters in Talisman or 2 different characters in Runebound. Now, the bird is kind of a simplified character at the beginning of the game because they don't have their own inventory, their own weapons, their own abilities, and so on. And there are a lot of different birds that you can pick at the beginning of the game. But at some point during the game, you can pay 4 gems to upgrade your bird to a trained version of that bird. And at that point, you will unlock a special ability for each bird, and each bird has a different special ability. And so this is kind of a way that you can level up your additional character, your side character, and that's really cool. So on a turn, you will start at the beginning of the game. Everybody will start in one of the 4 different cities. We have Blacksville, we have Black Sand, or Lilacsville, I should say, Lilacsville, Black Sand, Greyhaven, and Bluevale. And in the city, you will have some equipment that you can buy. Each city will have 1 piece of rare gear and then a few pieces of other gear that you can buy. So you can get things like the Spirit Blade, some rotten food, a dragon heart, or a luck potion. And with one of the expansions adds city events, and we'll take a look at that when we get to that expansion. And then each of the cities will also have a quest associated with it. And there are a number of different quests that you can go on. And so these quests cycle in and out as quests are completed. And the quests will have you do certain things like going out to certain regions, either looking for certain kind of non-combat encounters, looking to have encounters with different NPCs, maybe fighting some bandits, going into a mine to fight some demons or a bloodsucker, maybe going into a forest or something to fight some elementals. You might be looking for some lost treasure at one of the beach regions, or maybe going into a mountain region and looking for the Assassin's Guild and trying to put it into them. There are different guilds and different ways that you can interact with the quests, but each city will have a certain quest associated with it. And remember, that goes along with that journal with the virtue of fellowship, trying to gain 3 different quests. But at the beginning of the game, your Pauper and your Pauper's bird will start in their hometown, and then they will move out and have adventures just like in a game of Talisman or just like in a game of Runebound. And in the base game, there are 5 different areas where you can have encounters. You can have encounters in a swamp. You can have encounters in a mine. You can also have encounters in a beach region. You can have encounters in a mountain region, and you can also have encounters in a forest region. So each region has a number of different squares associated with it. Those aren't spaces. On your turn, you move from one region to a next if it's connected. And once you're in that region, you can have an encounter with anything that's face up in that region. You don't have to move from square to square. Each square just tells you how many face-up encounters can be in that one region. But in the mountains, you might face off against things like you might find some iron ore because you might have to get certain elements, certain materials in order to learn recipes. You can fight things like a copper golem. And then when you fight, you have the strength that you have to beat. So to defeat this copper golem, you have to meet or beat a 6. And combat is very easy. It's card-based, but the cards are basically like a D6 in card form. And each of the Paupers will have its own deck of outcome cards, and these are used for combat and for other things as well. And when you have combat, you simply flip over the top card and you take that value and you add it to any of your equipment that you have, maybe some swords or some spears, or maybe you're using some kind of magic potion or any of the equipment that adds to combat. And then if you meet or beat that target number, you defeat the enemy. Now, there are some other interesting cards in your deck of outcomes. The lower value cards, while you may not get to add a lot to your combat value, they will usually give you something unique that you can do. So if you roll a 2 or draw a 2, if this region is connected to black sand, collect 1 gem and add 2 to your strength. And there are other things too that might trigger as you draw certain numbers in your outcome deck. So this is just kind of a little bit more of a unique way to roll a d6. It's weighted, so there are fewer 6s and fewer 1s. So I think it's just as fun as rolling dice. And usually I prefer dice in these kinds of games, but I do like this outcome deck, and I think it works really well. And it's always fun to draw those low numbers because you may not be able to defeat the enemy, but you might be able to do something else cool. There are also Yeti claws or things that you can find. You might have to fight an old dwarf, or maybe you stumble across the Wizards Guild. So if your Pauper has learned fewer than 3 recipes, they will teach you one. Learn one recipe in learning. So let's talk about recipes real quick. At the beginning of the game, when you're setting up your Pauper, you've chosen your bird, and you will also get to choose 3 recipes. And these recipes correspond to the recipe book, which you can, if you learn 5 recipes, you learn the virtue of knowledge. So this is one of the win conditions. And these will all have different items that you need to collect. So in order to learn this recipe for the ranger, you need to find a firefly tail, a dragon heart, and an elf ear. The color gives you a clue of where you can find that. You can go to the matching region. So the elf ear can be found in the forest. The firefly tail can be found in the swamps, and the dragon heart can be found in the mines there in the caves. And once you find all 3 of those items, you can flip that over, and then you will basically unlock a new skill or a new power for your Pauper. So you can unlock the skill of Ranger. When your Pauper defeats a hazard, collect 1 extra gem. And there are all kinds of different talents or different recipes you can learn. Foresight, Wraith, Fleetfoot, Scavenger, Smithy, Cajoler, Redeemer, Swimming, Teleporting, Transmute, Unlocking, Strength, Diviner, Thief. So yeah, all kinds of cool things to do. So when you find some of those boring items that are just materials, it's always exciting if they match one of your recipes so you can unlock one of those skills. I really do like that system a lot. And I like that is one of the win conditions, improving your character. That's super cool. In the mines here, you might face off against some things like a Bone King, a Wood Golem. You might have to face off against a pit trap and maybe avoid the trap. You can find a hidden stash. There's an elf ear, a fighter's guild, fairy dung, a dead adventurer. Draw 1 equipment and add it to your inventory. So the stack of equipment cards is pretty good here. So we have all of our equipment cards. Again, these can be found out in the world, but they can also be purchased in town when you go back to town to spend some of your spoils. And you can buy things and find things like a firefly lamp, a world map, an ice pick, a ball of yarn, some demon teeth, a fight potion, holy potions, an aged mechanism, a toolkit, a rusty key. There's another rusty key. You can unlock treasure chests, a warhammer, or a sword. So not a lot of weapons. This isn't really a weapon and armor style game. This is kind of a different type of fantasy. In my original video for Pauper's Ladder, I called it something like if King Crimson and Steel Ice Span came together and made a board game, they might make something like Moon Towers. It has that kind of that British folk revival and prog rock feel to it. And that's one of the reasons why I love this game so much, because I like that kind of music, or maybe Genesis, early Genesis. I like that kind of music and I like that vibe, and Pauper's Ladder gives me that. So if your Pauper or your bird travels into the swamps, you might face off against some things like a wire trap. You might come across a gas miner. If you ever see these happy face symbols, those will correspond to these dice. What do they call them? The lucky charms. And at certain times, you will just have to roll these. These are basically kind of like a D3. There are 3 different lucky charms associated with the game. We have the white one, which is in the base game. I think the yellow one came in the Moon Towers expansion, and the blue one came in the Cobbled Isle, the newest expansion. You might have to face off against a ghost or a pest, an abandoned stash, or maybe you come across the swamp lady. You may discard 1 vermin. So each of the enemies will have a different type associated with it, such as undead or vermin. And sometimes you need to collect certain types of enemies as trophies in order to trade them for an additional award. So if you have a vermin and you meet the swamp lady, you may discard 1 vermin hazard from your trophy room, collect 3 gems. The swamp lady stays in this region for the rest of the game. So if you discovered the swamp lady here, she has set up her camp there, and now she is a permanent fixture in this swamp. If your Pauper or your bird travels to the forest, they might encounter some things such as a wood elf that they would have to fight, or maybe a gambling den. So gambling has been expanded in the Cobbled Isles. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You might have more pests or an elf ear. Let's see what kind of like NPCs. I know there are a few. There are a few kind of NPC type encounters in each region. Here we have the charitable man. If you have the least gems of all the players, he gives you 4 gems. Nice. Oh, wild fairy. The fairies are pretty crazy in this game. And then finally in the base game, you can also have encounters at the beach regions, and those are these yellow regions here. And you might have to face off against a giant clam. You can find a chemist's pouch, find some pearls, a shell. There's one of the dragons, so that would give you, when you defeat a dragon, you can earn the virtue of magnificence. And the dragons are pretty tough. So it's not very easy to defeat a dragon, but that will give you one of your virtues as you head to victory. So yeah, that's kind of the base game. That's the game at its most basic form. You are traveling through the land, your Pauper and your bird, going to different regions, having different kinds of encounters, earning gold, earning things to buy more equipment, finding more equipment, and working your way towards either learning those recipes, of donating 30 gems, of defeating a certain number of enemies, of defeating a dragon, or of working on 3 different quests. And the first player to do 3 of those 5 things is the winner of the game. They are awarded as they're the ultimate Pauper, and they get to go on and earn some more money and have a better life. Now, along with the base game, you can also, there's this one lonely Pauper mode that is available. And I think this was limited to 250. I'm not sure if it is still available or not. And I think I believe it's also available as a download, but I can't quite remember. But this was a solo version that came out for Pauper's Ladder. And this was actually created by Russ Law and Paul Stapleton. So Paul Stapleton is the designer and artist of Pauper's Ladder. And Russ Law, you might recognize his name because we have covered some of his games before. And that is Bag of Dungeon and Bag of Dungeon 2. And so this solo version here was created by Paul Stapleton and Russ Law, and it's a kind of a scenario-based solo version for Pauper's Ladder. This will give you a certain kind of a time limit you can choose a difficulty to have fewer turns or more turns, and you have to do a certain number of things within those turns in order to win the game as the Lonely Pauper. But this will have a certain number of scenarios that you can set up that are kind of like almost like puzzle elements to the game. Very similar to how Glory 2nd Edition handled its solo stuff. So we have Garlium's Tournament here. We have another scenario is the Fiery Siege. And then we have the Saltash Necromancer scenario. So this is a pretty easy, pretty quick way to play the game solo. This is not my favorite way to play solo. I prefer to play this game solo very similar to how I play Talisman or Runebound solo. And that is simply to just play the game with one character and see if I can win or not. I don't like a lot of time pressure in these kinds of games. For me, I just like to have the adventure. So I just play solo by playing by myself, or maybe playing two-handed and having a competition to see who can have the best luck while I'm playing between the different characters that I am playing. But this is just another kind of module that you can get for this game where you can mix this in, and this will just give you an additional set of options, an additional way to play, and an additional way to enjoy Pauper's Ladder. Another small expansion that came out, and this one is still available, I just checked the website, and that is Bright Helm Bodox, a monstrous expansion for Pauper's Ladder. So this small micro expansion comes with 4 new Paupers, and they're kind of like these evil supernatural characters. We have Godless Screp, we have a Raggy Nebbitson, we have Lord Taurine and Princess Reapa Peppo. And these Bodox, these Paupers, they can be played in any game mode. So you can use these in the normal game. You can use these in Lonely Pauper, the solo expansion. You can use these in the Moon Towers expansion, or you can use these with anything in the Cobbled Isles expansion. So this expansion just comes with those 4 different characters, and they're these kind of evil, supernatural style characters that play a little bit different because each one of these Bodocs has a way to spend money to turn enemies into familiars. And so there's Princess Peppo here. She may have 1 vermin familiar. When your Pauper fights a hazard, you can use your familiar's strength instead of drawing an outcome card. So just a little bit of a different way to play the game. But this says that as the moon rises, they crawl from their dark, moldering layers, night horrors that scare Brighthelm's children from sleep. These mysterious, mischievous, and downright malevolent boogeymen are using Garolium's tournament as the perfect foil for a power grab. So that was something that we did just mention in the Pauper's Ladder here, in the One Lonely Pauper here. We do have that Garolium's tournament as a scenario. And the day is finally here. As you head down the little cobbled streets of your home street, you're surprised to see how many of your friends have turned out to wave you off. Strangely, nobody you know has signed up to enter the tournament. It's a shame. The company would have been nice. Still, you feel warmed by the waves and well wishes as the familiar faces all turn your way. Eventually, you reach the city gates. You fight down a note of apprehension. You've never left home before. You've heard the stories of the wild regions that connect each of Brighthelm's 4 cities and enjoyed the shiver of fear they sent down your spine around the campfires of your youth. Now they seem a little too real. So Garolium's tournament is kind of the main goal of Pauper's Ladder. That is how the Paupers are competing to get a better life. Yeah, so this is just a small expansion. This is, again, it's a limited edition of 200, but I did just check as of October 12th or so, there are still versions of this on the website that you can get. But this will just add a little bit more variety to your games of Pauper's Ladder, and you can use them in any mode. So if you really like the game, I think this is a really cool, small little expansion, and it's pretty cheap. It's only like $12 or something. Okay, so coming up next is the Moon Towers expansion, and this was kind of the first big box expansion, or first substantial expansion for Pauper's Ladder. So the Moon Towers here comes in this kind of nice, small, long box here. Let's read a little bit about Moon Towers. Nobody knew where they came from, and nobody knew why, but there they stood, like they had been under our feet all along. The most noble knights and squires in the land have decided, from behind the safety of firmly bolted doors, that they're far too busy and far too important to deal with this deadly new threat, which makes it the Pauper's responsibility, or, if you prefer, yours. The Moon Towers is a new adventure for Pauper's Ladder with over 400 new cards depicting towns, ruins, hazards, villages, equipment, quests, and dangers. It also introduces solo rules, 14 new birds, 8 new Paupers, talents to learn, curses to suffer, and of course, the malevolent Moon Towers. So the Moon Towers is a little bit of a unique expansion in that most of the stuff in the Moon Towers is not mixed in with the base game stuff. You kind of have to keep the things separate. And I don't think it would completely break the game if you combine them. But I think if you combined everything, then the Moon Towers adventure would actually feel a little bit diluted, and it might take a really long time to play. So it's better if you keep your cards separate and just think of this as kind of an additional adventure that you can go on after you've already played the Pauper's Ladder a couple times. It adds a few more rules and of some different win conditions because you do need to deal with these Moon Towers. So the Moon Towers expansion does come with a whole heck of a lot of cards. So you will get a whole new deck of mountain encounters. You will get a huge deck of equipment, so all kinds of new equipment. I think the equipment could actually be combined. The equipment decks could be combined just so you would have more variety in whichever mode you are playing. I don't think that would break the game at all. If somebody has done it and you find that it's fun or you find that it doesn't really work, maybe let me know in a comment or something down below. But a huge deck of equipment, and it's always nice to have more gear and more loot to find. You will get a whole new deck of quests. So these are new quests specifically for the Moon Tower. You will have a whole new deck of beach encounters, a whole new deck of mine encounters, a new deck of swamp encounters. You will have some replacement recipes that you can use, and also a new deck of forest encounters. Now, one of the main things that the Moon Towers expansion adds, and these can be used in any mode that you are playing, and there are rules for these for solo play or for the new co-op version. So whichever version of Pauper's Ladder you are playing, you can use the talents and the curses. And I highly recommend using both of these. I think they make the game a lot of fun. So the talents are basically skills that your Pauper can learn, and you can have one talent active at a time. At the beginning of the game, you will be able to choose from a couple in order to in order to outfit your Pauper. And at certain points in the game, you can draw more, and then you can choose which one you want. And the talents are just another option that you have that will give your Pauper more abilities. And so something for you as the player to draw upon. So you might be a pugilist or a tracker, a storyteller, forager, spelunker, an artist, a trooper, an actor, an arbiter, a jester, a forester, merchant, dung carter, a laborer, a fortune teller, a peddler, and so on. So all kinds of really cool skills that your Pauper can unlock and make them more powerful. Now, the Cobble's Isle expansion also comes with some talents, and I have those mixed in. So any expansion that comes with talents, you can just mix all the talents together to have a nice, robust deck of different talents and skills to learn. At certain points, though, if you use the talents, you need to use the curses. So these two come, they're the double side of a coin, the double-bladed edge of a sword or something like that. If you have talents, there's also a chance that you can get cursed. And these are negative things. And you can get rid of curses by going to a town and paying, I think it's 1 or 2 gems in order to get rid of a curse. But these will just make your game a little harder. They will make your Pauper a little less powerful, and you will have to deal with it. But they're usually some kind of a gameplay thing that makes the game a little more interesting, and that's why I like them. You can become idle or modest, butterfingered, allergic, phobic. You can become dizzy. You can get a plague. You can be a bungler or a corrupted. You can get confused or unlucky, sickly, graceless, and so on. So again, just a really neat option, but it is modular, so you don't have to use them. But if you use one, you need to use the other. Another thing that the Moon Towers expansion adds is a more robust solo mode that you can use for the base game or for the Moon Towers mode. And there are 2 different difficulties. We have easy and medium and hard and very hard. So I guess there's actually 4 different difficulties, and each side has 2 different difficulties. And basically you need to do a certain number of things in the game before time runs out. And this game actually, the solo mode here actually introduces health for your Pauper and for your bird. The base game and the Moon Towers expansion, you don't need to worry about hit points in this game. You can't really die. But in the solo mode, you have hit points, and so you can die. And you have to heal when you go to cities. It just gives you kind of another thing that you have to manage in order for the game to have a chance to kind of fight back against you. But this is a cool solo mode. When I play solo, I use this rather than the One Lonely Pauper scenario mode. I like this. I think it works pretty well. I usually play on the easy or middle difficulty, and I usually end up having enough time to have a good adventure and to satisfy the win conditions that I am looking for. One final thing that you can get for the Moon Towers expansion is this atlas. It's an illustrated field guide and achievements journal. And I think this is really, really cool. I love this idea. It's basically a coloring book, but you also have some lore and some stories and some things that you can learn about the world of Pauper's Ladder in this field guide. And it's also an achievement journal, and it'll give you certain things that you can work for. So if you like achievements in modern video games, or you like unlocking trophies, or you just want to add a little bit of spice, a little bit of a new element to your game of Pauper's Ladder, you can use this field guide, and it is super cool. So I often forget to use this. I forget to have it out while I am playing, but I should always remember to have it out so I can color in the various things that I encounter during my gameplay. So at one point I was using Darius Burr, and this was the pauper I was using, and so I went ahead and colored him in. Any morning, came sun, hail or snow, Darius will be hauling his net at Grey Haven's jetty. Preferring the quiet, contemplative life fishing affords him, he spends his days selling his daily catch to the local market before heading off for a pint or three. He loved to fish the wide open seas around Brighthelm, but saving up for a boat is difficult when the briny brewer demands his attention. And so there are two different achievements associated with Darius when you play Darius Burr. You can move 4 gems from your fish hook to your purse. So one of his powers was he's able to sell fish that he collected. So you could do that to earn that achievement, or you can win. And if you win the game with Darius Burr, then you win that achievement. So we have the different paupers that you can play as. We have all of the different birds here, and we have different achievements associated with each of the birds. We have different achievements associated with a bunch of the different hazards, such as the creeping rot, the elf, the evil eyes here, the different elementals, the merman, the mire bloat. We have the different moon guards. So these are the different guardians that are guarding the moon towers, and you have to defeat those. We might have to come across a scarecrow or a sea seer. The snabbit. Brighthelm used to have a problem with giants. Then the snabbits came and killed them all. Now Brighthelm has a problem with snabbits instead. We have to defeat a snabbit and put it in your trophy room, and defeat a snabbit and keep its gems. So 2 different kinds of achievements associated with that encounter there. But this is just a really neat little book with cool art. I love Paul Stapleton's art. I know it's not universally loved. It does have a very kind of unique style, and you either love it or you don't, I think. I've heard people, some of the common complaints about Pauper's Ladder is certain people don't like the art style, they don't like the aesthetic, and I totally get that. It's kind of at the direct opposite end of the spectrum of dungeon degenerates, but they're both similar in that they are super unique and they have a very kind of one-of-a-kind vibe. And that's why I love both, and I have room for both in my collection. But this is just such a cool little expansion that just adds a little more flavor, adds some nice lore, and adds some nice achievements that you can chase just to make each game. Maybe you want to try to find this vending spell, so you can play a few games until you find this vending spell or something like that. I would love to see this kind of idea implemented in other games. I think it adds a lot of longevity. And I think if you're into the world of the game that you are playing, something like this is invaluable. Okay, and finally we have the latest expansion, and maybe the last expansion. I'm not sure. I don't know if Paul Stapleton is planning on updating or adding to this game anymore. I think it's in a perfect state. I just want 2 things. We'll talk about those after we talk about the Cobbled Isle here. But we did just take a look at this expansion, but I wanted to get everything all in one video to have a very, very comprehensive look at Pauper's Ladder. Kind of a place for anybody to go to find all the information they need about this game. So the Cobbled Isle here. Surrounded by the hustle and bustle of my home, I suddenly realized the greatest adventure to be had were here beneath my feet all along. The Cobbled Isle adds a city region deck to Pauper's Ladder and the Moon Towers, so now you can explore Brighthelm's colorful streets, and there's the Cuddy Wren, a merchant ship that sails the coast buying and selling exotic wares. There are also dice dens, special quests, more birds, curses and talents, and 2 new game modes, the Timely Pauper and We the Collective. So once you add in this expansion, you will have your base way to play it, the competitive way. You will have the One Lonely Pauper scenario solo mode. You have the solo mode from the Moon Towers. You have the whole Moon Towers adventure. And then with the Cobbled Isle, you will have a new shorter version where instead of learning 3 virtues, you can either learn 1 or 2 virtues to have a really short game, or you can also play the game cooperatively. And that's how I have the game set up now, is to play a cooperative mode. So let's talk about the things that the Cobbled Isle adds. I think one of the most interesting things it adds is a whole new deck of encounter cards for a whole new region, and that is the region of the cities here. So you have a huge deck of city encounters for when you go to the city. Not only can you shop, not only can you do a quest, but now you can actually visit locations and have encounters in the city. And yes, one of the locations you can visit in a city is the Dungeon Dive. So the Dungeon Dive is now in Pauper's Ladder. Dare you dive? If so, pay 2 gems and roll the Sea Charm. And then you have to fight either a wraith, a skeleton, a zombie, or a rat. And if you defeat it, you collect 6 gems. So very cool. I love that the Dungeon Dive is now part of Pauper's Ladder. But this city deck will have certain locations, and those locations will be signified by this icon here. And I think these were probably inspired by Paul Stapleton's other game called BN1. That's the letter B, the letter N, and 1. And that is a modern day adventure game set in the city of Brighton. And that is a marvelous game, super charming. I have a detailed video on that. But that game has these locations that you can go to around the city to have certain adventures. And so this does seem kind of like an offshoot of that. And so you can visit the prison, maybe have come across Beldam. You might have to fight a cutthroat. You can come across this diseased chap. That is hilarious. Maybe some rats there, a dice den. So towards the beginning of this video, we talked a little bit about how I said gambling has been expanded upon. This Cobbled Isle adds the dice den. And the dice den will have, 6 different little mini games that you can draw at random and just have kind of a little dice chucking, a little betting, a little gambling mini game that you can play. You can either play this solo or with other players while you are playing Pauper's Ladder, or there's also a little version of if you just wanted to play the dice den as a standalone kind of small little press your luck game. You can do that as well. Again, just another kind of modular piece that you can fit into your game. And Cobbled Isle adds quite a few of these little modules that you can mix and match and play with any of the other versions of Pauper's Ladder that you want to play. You can use anything from Cobbled Isle in the base game, in Lonely Pauper, in the other solo mode, or in the Moon Towers expansion. You can pick up some dock work, maybe come across an orphaned child, a haversack, a taxman, a signpost, shop work. Ooh, a wild dog might attack you on the streets there. Maybe there's an old fort or an herb garden, a trapper or a potion maker. All kinds of really cool stuff. This is a fantastic encounter deck. I love this encounter deck. It adds so much variety to the game, and I would probably never play without the city encounter deck. For me, this is just a staple in the game now that I will always play with. Another thing that the Cobbled Isle adds is this over here, this sideboard, and this is the Cuddy Wren. And the Cuddy Wren is represented by this standee here, and this is a ship that sails around the board from one region to the next. And on this ship, you will have a certain number of cargo items, and these cargo items can be bought and sold. So this adds a little bit of a kind of an economy, and you can play this game. You can play the Cuddy Wren in order to earn more gold. But you can also have encounters on the Cuddy Wren. Maybe you need to fix their leaky pipes or some woodworms. But there are all kinds of cool different things that you can encounter on the Cuddy Wren. So this is kind of like another roaming region. This is kind of like another region deck, another deck of encounter cards. But this region roams around and you kind of never know where it's going to be. And then on the Cuddy Wren, you have the Chandler, and the Chandler will tell you, give you ideas about the economy, what they are looking to buy, what they are looking to sell. and you never quite know what the Chandler is going to be looking for. And each of the 4 cities, Bluevale, Greyhaven, Black Sand, and Lilacsville, has a corresponding Chandler there that you can visit. So again, just a whole nother cool little module that can be plugged in to any of the other versions of Pauper's Ladder that you are playing. So the short mode here, you will have these virtue cards. And at the beginning of the game, so this is the what do they call this? So this is called the timely Pauper. So you can randomly deal out one of these cards to each player, and you can use these in the solo mode as well. And that will give you just 2 virtues that you need to work on, either generosity and then either magnificence or bravery, or fellowship and magnificence or bravery, or generosity and fellowship, knowledge and generosity, magnificence or bravery and knowledge, and finally knowledge and fellowship. So in this mode here, you just need to find 2 of the virtues in order to win the game rather than 3. And it adds a little bit of variety because if you're playing this mode, you never know which virtues you need to win the game. So there is some replayability when you're playing this mode. And you can also use this mode in the cooperative version. And in the co-op version, all of the players will be dealt one of these virtue cards, and you have to either gain 1 virtue or both virtues, depending on if you want to play a harder or easier game. And you have to do that in a certain number of rounds. And you also have to make sure that there aren't too many threats out on the board, because in this co-op mode, the last player, the player who's going last each turn, is called the Hawk's Guard. And they will have this token here as a reminder. And so whenever the last player goes, after they've taken their turn, you look at the board and you look at how many face-up threats are in the regions. And you count those, and depending on how many there are, these towers will get destroyed. So these are kind of watch towers. These are guard towers that have been set up around the land. And for each threat that is face up, you lose 1. And so as you lose them, they will flip over to their single side. And then as you lose more, you will start discarding those. And you have to earn a certain number of virtues before you spend all of these tokens. The rounds are pretty generous, and there are ways that you can gain those back, because if there aren't any, if you've cleared out all the threats, so this is literally a threat management mode, if you're managing to keep the threats at bay and at the end of the Hawk's Guard's turn, there are no threats on the board, you can roll the blue lucky charm, and if you roll the super happy face, you actually gain some time back. So there's a way to kind of mitigate that luck as you are taking care of the threats out on the board. And I think it's a pretty cool little way to implement a co-op mode in this kind of overland adventure game. And then let's see, finally in the Cobbled Isle, we have this little modular expansion, and this is super cool. I love this. This is a personal quest for every pauper that is available, including those Bodaks. So we have all of the various paupers. We have Tareen, Peppy, Gadalus, Ginny, Desi, Darius, Craggy, Sissy, Brenny, Bobby, Begonia, David, Sid, Sarah, Rummy, Raggy, Ognov, Nessie, Maud, Kazaa, Groatsworth, and Grennery. And this is a quest that each of the various characters will have at the beginning of the game. My characters right now that I'm playing, Dagris and Alf. And Dalgris, he has the tick list. You've always been a connoisseur. It could finally come in useful. Use 4 different potions. So throughout the game, if I use 4 different potions, I get to draw 2 extra equipment cards. And Alf here, Alf has looking for that rich seam. You know a valuable vein when you follow one. Collect iron ore and copper ore during the game in either order. Reward 6 gems. So again, this is just a little modular expansion. You don't have to play with it, but it adds a little bit of variety, a little bit of spice to this game. And you can use this in any mode: solo mode, co-op mode, short mode, regular mode, moon tower mode. And it just gives you another kind of neat thing to do while you are playing Pauper's Ladder. This is a fantastic expansion. So much stuff is crammed in this small box, and I love it. I love this kind of expansion that adds little modular things that you can plug and play, and you can just make the game that you already like even better. So there are two things that I'm still looking for in Pauper's Ladder, and both of them are basically cosmetic. One is I would like to see a comprehensive rulebook, because while this game is not complicated, there are certain things in each rulebook that I kind of forget. I forget where it's at. So I would like to see a comprehensive rulebook that has all of the base rules with the cobbled isle rules and with the moon tower rules all in one rulebook in an organized way with an index and with a good table of contents. So it's just easier to know which module you're using and how to use it. I think that would make playing the game with all of the expansions much easier. The second thing that I would like to see is standees for the Paupers. Right now, the Paupers are represented by these giant chunky meeples, and while these are kind of cool, I think having standees with the art on there would be awesome. And I would love to see that as an expansion, kind of a comprehensive rule book and a board, a punch board full of each of the Paupers as a standee. And you don't even need to have the full body. We could just have, or with legs and everything, we could just have this bust style standee here, because this cobbled isle does come with a couple standees. We have the standee for the Cuddy and the standee for the moon towers. And I just think the game would look so much better if we had standees for all of the Paupers. I would absolutely love that. I think that would be so cool. It would just add a nice visual element. But those are really the only things that I think are missing from Pauper's Ladder. As of right now, Pauper's Ladder is in this perfect state of abundance. There are a ton of options, all kinds of different ways you want to play the game, and they all play really well. The game rarely overstays its welcome. It does rely on a lot of luck, like a game like Runebound or Talisman. So if you don't like a lot of luck in your adventure games, you're probably not going to like Pauper's Ladder. If you're not into the art, I can see that being a pretty hard sell because the art is super unique. Like Dungeon Degenerates, there are people who don't like the art for Dungeon Degenerates. It puts some people off because it is bold, it is unique. And that is a little bit of edge and a little bit of grit, whereas Pauper's Ladder is both super unique and it has a very bold look, but it is kind of a rounded. It's kind of it's edgy in the fact that it lacks an edge in some ways. It's very inviting. It's very wholesome, and I like that. But there's so much to do in this game, so much adventure to have. It's charming. It's pleasant. I love being in this world. I love learning about the world. I like using this atlas so I can learn about the lore and kind of have cool little things to do from one region to the next, chasing those achievements, getting out my colored pencils and paint and drawing in this atlas is super fun. But yeah, I think this game is in this perfect state right now. I kind of put this up there with Quest for the Lost Pixel and with Iron Helm, and maybe also with Dungeon Degenerates. These are games that they're bold statement games made by a very small team, often just one person, maybe just one or two people. And these are the kinds of games that I really do appreciate on the Dungeon Dive. These are the kinds of games that make being in this hobby space so much fun for me. These are the kinds of games that I look for, that I seek out. And this is kind of a game that I wish I had my whole life. And this is a game that I'm going to treasure for a very, very long time. Now, I know some people have been asking, because it's a little bit hard to get, especially if you're outside of the UK and you can't use Amazon.uk. And it can be a little expensive. Is the game worth it? And I think altogether it's about $200 for everything, for all of the expansions. Maybe I think that's including shipping as well. Maybe it's a little bit less, but that's a really hard question to answer. For me, if I lost my collection of Pauper's Ladder, I would immediately buy it again. That's how much I like it. It's hard for me to say if somebody else will have that value in the game. So that's why I wanted to present to you all of this information so you can make a sound choice. I think it's worth it, but this is kind of specifically a game that I love, a game that is kind of made for me. This is the exact kind of adventure game that I look for. And if you like games like Runebound, if you like games like Talisman or Dungeon Degenerates, or you like really strong indie games like Quest for the Lost Pixel and Iron Helm, then I think that Pauper's Ladder is worth the investment, and you will get a lot of joy out of the game. And you will have kind of a unique game in your collection as well. And unique games are fun to own and fun to look at. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this kind of detailed, comprehensive look at Pauper's Ladder. And we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.